Guys, we've got to have a serious talk about crypto. There are a lot of great and wonderful things in crypto, but there's also a lot of us, the crypto community, doing pretend things. Over and over again, we keep pretending that crypto is some kind of perpetual money machine. We keep designing more and more complex systems, and each time we pretend like it's some kind of perpetual wealth machine. The make-believe idea is always that people will be able to jump in, make their deposit, and don't get it twisted, there's always a deposit of some kind. And everyone will somehow do well ad infinitum. There's usually some kind of a product or service theoretically produced by these schemes, but it's almost never enough to justify the amount of wealth creation we pretend these systems are capable of. There's a finite amount of projects we can build in a year in crypto. We got to stop with the pretend perpetual money machines and start building real things if we want to get anywhere real with crypto. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss some recent assertions with regard to Uniswap, some recent accusations with regard to Alameda and FTX, the social media reinvention plans from A16Z, and an early look at Hydra. If you were ever so slightly alarmed by the unusual lack of a photo in today's thumbnail, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. My fellow people of crypto, this must stop. We've been doing this for a long time now. It's got to come to a stop. We have the foundations for a parallel financial system that can be better than what many of us grew up with in the pre-crypto days. Satoshi's gift to the world. Over a decade ago, he planted this seed that has grown and flourished and blossomed into a great foundation for a parallel financial system. And what have we used it for? Repeatedly, we've constructed these bits of software that live on the blockchain, and with their front ends, they're usually like websites, we call them platforms or protocols, but they're really just bits of software that live on the blockchain. And their real purpose always boils down to one thing when it's all said and done. They either expressly or impliedly convince users there's a good chance they'll make a lot of money if they do one important thing, just one important thing. It's usually very passive. After you do this one vital thing, you have to make a deposit. We call it different things. We call it LPing, yield farming, locking, staking, delegating. We have a million different names for it. But that's the one thing you must do. And it is a thing. You can make a little bit of money sometimes in traditional finance and in crypto if you take some of your money and someone puts it to a good use that creates actual utility, something we'll get back to later, creates actual utility, then you can usually make a little bit of money. If you're lucky, if things go right, you can make a little bit of money. This is the way things work with money. If something of utility is created with your money, sometimes you can make a little bit of money. But that's not what our protocols and our platforms, that's not what they sell. What they sell is the idea that you can make a lot of money if you just do this all-important task of making a deposit. Here's an example. This poster did an analysis of one liquidity pool on Uniswap V3. It was the Ethereum USDC pool. This is an analysis of liquidity providers and how they did. He says Uniswap V3 LPs on ETH USDC have lost an estimated $100 million. This is his analysis last month. That's after fees on top of their original LP holdings. Obviously, I haven't verified any of this. This is just what he's posting, not representations of truth by me. I don't know, but this is what he's representing. And he gives us this chart. Don't worry, he's going to explain this chart down below here. So He gives a quick explanation of what impermanent loss is and how the balance between fees and impermanent loss is really the things you're looking at as an LP. And then he tells you exactly what it looked like. Here's how to interpret this chart. LPs after 5 minutes, negative 21 million. LPs after 1 hour, negative 56 million. After 1 day, negative 97 million. After 7 days, they improved a tiny bit, negative 92 million. And you can see from this chart, yep, after a certain amount of time, it just gets worse and worse and worse for these LPs in this one liquidity pool on Uniswap. Obviously, that paints a very bleak picture. And he talked about how some people had taken the research he did and decided that it means that retail should not participate in passive liquidity providing on constant product automated market makers due to the large losses, due to the impermanent loss. He says he's personally neutral in that view, but he gives you a quote of somebody explaining why this basically means retail shouldn't be involved in providing AMM liquidity. Then it gets interesting. Here's the really disturbing part. I think people who are providing liquidity and, obviously he's not taking into account yield farming where they try to make up to you the impermanent loss. So he's not addressing yield farming. Obviously, that has to be taken into account too. But just on this liquidity providing thing, here's the really disturbing part. He says that these 3 named members of Uniswap's venture and research arm sent a scathing thread saying that my analysis took the cookie on chart crime versus Uniswap, claiming that it was wrong in every dimension. And he quotes one of them as saying, "Too long didn't read. The Uniswap V3 ETH USDC pool has generated 2.5x more fees for LPs than the 24-hour markout." Here's where it gets kind of disturbing. So he points out Uniswap's team claimed that I was not counting fees in my analysis and that Uniswap's ETH USDC pool was actually profitable by 150 million since inception, a truly mind-boggling difference. And down below here, he says that same trader who had taken his research, or that same poster, at least, I have no idea what his trading activities are, but that same poster who took his research and said that retail shouldn't be involved in LPing on constant product automated market makers, discovered that Uniswap had a bug in their query that was throwing out all LP buys over half of all the LP trades. And then he quotes them and he says, when correcting for the bug, their analysis looked identical to the original chart, showing almost 100 million in losses to LPs marked to 1 day. Again, I'm not representing any of this as fact, but if this poster is correct about everything he's saying, then it means that maybe our DeFi platforms don't even themselves realize what a bad proposition they can be for retail users. Maybe they themselves have bought into their own hype, and even they don't even realize what a raw deal it can be for the end users. He says, I don't mean to wax poetic in the next few tweets, but the fact that the Uniswap team thinks it was reasonable that 150 million in profit was made providing passive liquidity in the ETH USDC pool is simply astounding to me. And he's going to explain why it's, to him, ridiculous that the Uniswap team could have thought that their profit figure they came up with was reasonable. To him, it seems completely ridiculous. If we look at his profile here, it says previously at high frequency trading, I believe HFT, he means high frequency trading there. He says high frequency trading desks with insanely fast connectivity infrastructure with armies of PhD quants competing in a market 50 times the size of crypto would be happy to make half as much of that profit. How could a passive liquidity provider with no information even come close? The confirmation bias of the Uniswap team is clear. They believe that the realities of financial markets simply don't apply to them. They truly think they have invented perpetual motion, a post-history money printing machine with no alpha generation required. This misinformation and lack of truth, again, I'm just quoting someone else here. This is not my communication here. This misinformation and lack of truth from Uniswap has spread like a virus among venerated members of the DeFi community who trust the Uniswap brand and who haven't dug into the data themselves. Social proofing is a dangerous beast. Other naive lemmings have followed them off of the cliff, claiming that they too have solved the problem of financial alchemy, turning lead into gold. I know some of you are out there right now saying, yeah, but I LP'd in this project and I also yield farmed right when the liquidity pool opened and I made a bunch of money. Yes, wherever there is, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything here, but wherever you have anything where there's Ponzi-nomics, you can make money early on. That's how Ponzi schemes work. They're able to convince later entrants because early people made some money. A bunch of people made some money LPing and yield farming, and then the yield farming ends, and people keep on LPing. There continue to be people entering these liquidity pools as liquidity providers. That's common to all Ponzi schemes, that some people did make some money, at some point, and that's why later people got in. But it's a game of musical chairs. At some point, the music ends. Obviously, none of this speaks to what's coming. Yarek, who you saw me interview on this channel, quote tweeted about this exact thread. He said, "That's why Axo Trade is built differently from the ground up. No built-in AMM loss sets you up for a much better start as a market maker. Ability to adapt to the market and what is being traded means you define your capital efficiency, not the formula everyone must use." So nobody really knows what the future holds, but it's going to be interesting to see. Unfortunately, this doesn't just apply to decentralized exchanges. You'll remember not too far in the recent past, we had the whole Luna Terra fiasco, debacle, crisis, Three Arrows Capital, these very large entities or blockchain ecosystems were basically going broke. And a lot of people were going to lose a lot of money. And part of that, the aftermath of the whole drama, was that Sam Bankman-Fried and his various entities, I can't remember which entities were supposed to be doing what, whether it was FTX or Alameda, but there was always this chance they were going to swoop in and save some of these entities on the presumption that they could sort of help save crypto. They were going to be the saviors of crypto by propping up some of these entities. It looks like a lot of us were confronted with a very different picture of what might be going on with FTX and Alameda this morning. This tweet came out, and again, I'm not presenting any of this as fact. I'm just reading other people's tweets. So CZ said, as part of Binance's exit from FTX equity last year, Binance received roughly 2.1 billion USD equivalent in cash in BUSD and FTT. Due to recent revelations that have come to light, we have decided to liquidate any remaining FTT on our books. And if this was the first you saw about it, like it was for me, you might ask yourself, what recent revelations are we talking about here? So you might have done like me and searched and found other people asking exactly the same question. Here's one thread where someone got a response. And again, I would classify this as an accusation. I have no idea whether this is true or not. But this account, Duo9, said maybe this helps and quoted their own tweet from, it looks like earlier today. For those confused about FTX and FTT, here's the too long didn't read. Number one, FTX prints FTT out of thin air. That's this part right here, I assume, in their little infographic. FTX lends FTT to Alameda Research. Alameda Research borrows USD stables against FTT. So this part, Alameda Research, Alameda Research sends USD stables to FTX. Repeat equals infinite money. No need to sell FTT. So if this is the case, if this is what's going, they talk about the basic architecture of a flywheel scheme. They're referring to this as a flywheel scheme, and they're labeling these different sections as create token, pump token price, mark gains to balance sheet, show gains to investors, raise cash through equity sales or loans to pump the token price, which you can then use again on the flywheel. Again, I don't know. I don't know what truth is here and what's not. But what we've seen this year, what we've learned this year is that when people start saying things like this, it either turns out to be completely untrue or unfounded, or it turns out to be true and things start going downhill very quickly. To me, this is just another example of this. If this is all true, this is just another example of the same phenomenon. A complicated blockchain related, at least related system gets built up. It creates this perception of massive gains that are hugely disproportionate to the amount of utility that's actually being created. And eventually the music stops playing. I'm just going to beg one last time. If you are a builder, spelled with two O's, please build something with at least substantial utility. Stop with this de minimis utility nonsense. We've done it too many times. That day has passed. Please build something that produces some kind of substantial utility. We'll all be better off if that's what crypto starts doing. Okay, this is something basically written by A16Z. And I have to admit, when I was first shown this, I definitely immediately dismissed it because it was coming out of A16Z. I'm not a huge fan of VC firms telling us what we should do in crypto. That's usually the exact opposite of where I think crypto should go. But then I noticed the bios of these two authors. At least one of them did something for me. If we look here at the bottom, Andrew Hall is a professor of political economy and political science in the Graduate School of Business at Stanford University. This is kind of interesting because this article is about governance. And if there's something that political science studies, it's definitely governance. They know a thing or two about governance. They might be wrong, they might be right, but definitely governance is part of what's studied in political science. So they go through a whole thing where they try to compare this to the Glorious Revolution. We can skip all that part and get right here to the meat of it. This little diagram is really the meat of what they're suggesting. So they want to have user voting in some cases in social media. They label this as app versus protocol governance layers. So the layer one, you'll have a layer one blockchain and you'll have smart contracts running on that layer one blockchain. And then you might have a social media application. I noticed, I mean, they're a VC firm, so I can't expect them to describe it as a dApp. They just described it as an application. And they describe three different types of applications here. A platform that automatically bans users for breaking its rules, which even that would probably be an improvement over what we've had recently in social media, where humans are just kind of like making this decision of who they should ban. At least if a smart contract's doing it, it would be transparent. The second type of application would be platform that doesn't ban anyone. The third type would be a platform that lets users vote on whether to ban users. I think these all have pluses and minuses. I just like the level of transparency that's added by running this all through smart contracts. I don't know what you actually have to run through the smart contract if you have the platform that doesn't ban anyone. They said the smart contract will handle all platform data, core infrastructure, and rules for apps. So, I mean, you could do things like, digital identity. I mean, that does a lot, even in this platform that doesn't ban anyone. Self-sovereign identity running on the blockchain. That could do quite a bit, even in this case. And I want to say I would hang out here in the platform that doesn't ban anyone. I want to say this is the one I would choose. But then if I go in there and there's a bunch of hate groups kind of running around rampant, then of course I'm not going to want to hang out there. I instinctually want to say I would not hang out in this one, platform that lets users vote on whether to ban users, because I'm not exactly a huge fan of rule of the mob. I guess you could have a million different versions of this one, platform that automatically bans users for breaking its rules. And you could just have a whole spectrum of different platforms with rules encoded in these smart contracts in a transparent way. I mean, I guess I would end up hanging out in one of these if the rules were to my liking, like hey, no hate groups, but we're also not going to ban people just because they're on the right or the left and the platform employees are on the opposite side. I hate to say it, but I think A16Z may have hired the right person in this political science professor, because it sort of seems like some version of this one right here with very transparent, easy to understand rules that are sort of to your liking might be a huge improvement for most people. I know a lot of you are probably wondering at this point, hey, is Hydra an actual multi-headed serpent, or is it just a ghost multi-headed serpent that will never actually materialize? Well, Colin from Obsidian and Load Wallet is here to help answer that question. He says, Hell Hydra, and then he gives you this video. Look at those transactions fly by. I hope you had a great weekend, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.